Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. In 2018, the World Economic Forum noted that fraud and financial crime was a trillion-dollar industry. Reporting that private companies spent approximately $8.2 billion on anti-money laundering controls only in 2017. The crimes themselves, detected and undetected, have become numerous and costlier than ever. In a widely cited estimate, for every dollar of fraud, organizations lose nearly $3 once associated costs are added to the fraud loss itself. Risks for the corporate world arise from diverse factors, including vulnerabilities to fraud and financial crimes inherent in automation and digitization, massive growth in transaction volumes, and greater integration of the financial systems with domestic and international markets. I believe that organizations today face a greater risk of fraud occurring than ever before. Current business trends such as supply chain globalization and further reliance on information technology, coupled with economic instability and MICE, that is money, ideology, coercion, and ego, have increased both the pressures and the opportunities for the frauds to occur. Apart from this, organizations must respond to the heightened public and regulatory scrutiny like Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, and the potential for reputational damage that follows such fraud allegations. In this climate, organizations would be well advised to take a fresh look at their fraud risk management practices. Thank you all for joining us today as we bring to you another session as part of this unique series by Hero Mind, along with CII, promising to bring to you industry captains deliberating upon very pertinent topics. We have with us today Ms. Kamaljeet Kaur, a fellow chartered accountant and a certified fraud examiner. With over 18 years of experience, Kamaljeet's core strengths lie in cybersecurity and corporate fraud investigation, amongst others. Welcome, Kamaljeet, and it's over to you now.
Thank you so
much. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Hero Mind, for having me here. The topic which we will be discussing today in a very brief session will include something which is very, very big problem for us as an individual, for us as a corporate. And I'll just try to touch upon a very, very sensitive topic today called corporate frauds. But before we start as to what corporate fraud, what kind of frauds we are vulnerable to, let's understand what exactly is the fraud. Do we really understand the difference between fraud and error, especially as a corporate employee? So let's try and understand with a very basic concept of fraud, what is the difference between fraud and error? If I ask my audience as to what do you think is the difference between fraud and error, what would be your answer? Maybe most of you would agree that it's simply malicious intent. So that means when you know what you're doing is wrong, you call it fraud. At the same time, when you don't know what you're doing is wrong and you do it, you might call it as error. Sounds very simple, but unfortunately, it is not as simple as it sounds. Now, if my audience wouldn't feel offended, on a very lighter side, may I ask, are we as a corporate employee are doing any fraud day in, day out? What do you think would be the answer? Yes, no? Most of us will believe no. How can we do frauds? We are good people. All right. So how many times you guys have used office printer and scanner for personal purpose? Never? How many times you have picked up a pen from office and taken home? Is it a fraud? Do we really think this is a fraud? Well, most of us might believe no. This cannot be fraud. Why not? One, the monetary value of this is too small. The second, company doesn't give us enough salary anyways. This is our eligibility. This much we can take, right? Well, I don't get time to go out and take a printout. I'm too busy in office work. At least I can do this, right? We may have thousands of justification around it. However, the definition of fraud and error does not change. And that's called intent. Each time we use office printer and scanner for personal purpose, we are aware of the fact that this is for official purpose and we still use it. So what do we call it? It should be called as fraud. And you'll be amazed to know that this fraud, which I just mentioned, in technical language, we call it asset misappropriation. It is world's most frequently done fraud, not just India's, but world's most frequently done fraud. Yes, you may be right that monetary value of this fraud may be relatively lesser to financial statement fraud or any other fraud like corruption. But fraud is still a fraud. And most importantly, if a company cannot stop a $1 fraud, company cannot stop $100, $1,000 and $1 million fraud either. Unless and until each and every organization will have a zero tolerance on fraud, we may never be able to stop the fraud. I keep telling all my audience every time that fraud is something which will never go out of fashion. Fraud is there today, fraud's gonna be there tomorrow, and fraud's gonna be there for a pretty long time. So it's time for us to better equip ourselves with fraud prevention mechanism. Now, once we have understood that difference between fraud is simply the intent, it is also important for us to know that each time a fraudster does a fraud, they always have a rationalization. They always have a justification. We talk about any big fraud of banking, let's say, we talk about Kingfisher case, we talk about B.R. Shetty case in UAE. In each and every case, there is always a valid justification. There are 3 points which come together and then makes a fraud, and we call it fraud triangle. Very quickly, 3 angles which are involved in fraud triangle includes the financial pressure. And trust me, guys, this financial pressure may or may not be real. Each time we live beyond means, we are always under pressure. How does it impact a company? Each time you see your colleague or anybody in your team has suddenly started living beyond means, the lifestyle of that person is not matching with the salary person withdraws. You should rather be careful. A person might be having a dual income, and that dual income might be coming from wrong sources. So the first angle of fraud triangle is called financial pressure, but I generally call it as perceived financial pressure. Why do I call it perceived? Because this pressure may or may not be real. Anybody in my audience, can you please raise hand if you think you are getting too much of salary? Anyone? Please raise hand. Anyone who thinks you have lot of income, lot of salary you get from company? Anyone? No. You will never get answer of this question as yes in any forum, anywhere, any part of the world. Whatever we get is always less, and that's the first angle, financial pressure. The second angle of fraud triangle is called opportunity. You may blame Vijay Mallya, you may blame other people who may have taken loan from bank and run away. But if you ask me, I would blame bank as well. Who gives an opportunity to these people to commit crime? Maybe a bank. Now, bank may not have given this opportunity directly, but there may have some loopholes in the internal control which the other person could have exploited. That's also opportunity. So each time we as a company is having a weaker internal control, we give an opportunity to the outsider to commit a crime. That opportunity can be given both to an external or internal, employees or customer or vendor, anyone. So the second angle of fraud triangle is called opportunity. A company with weaker internal control always gives an opportunity to commit crime. A company with a stronger controls does not even give opportunity to commit crime. And the third, rationalization, justification. As I said, company did not give me bonus. I'll take 2 more prints today. I'll take a revenge from the company today. A rationalization. A company gives me so much of deadline. I'm always under pressure. Why should I not do something wrong? My salary is less. I should rather take a bribe from the vendor. So and so forth. That's called rationalization. When these three angles comes together, this is called fraud triangle. And this fraud triangle is not just an academic concept, guys. This holds true for each and every corporate fraud what we see. If these three angles do not come together at the same time, fraud cannot occur. So that is the concept of fraud. Now, once we have understood what exactly the fraud is all about, let's talk about a specific type of fraud. We have different type of fraud, internal and external. Internal, where each time employees get involved, internal people get involved. Those frauds are called internal frauds. External frauds can be done by customer, vendor, outsiders. Now, there can be different type of frauds in different type of industry. Banking is prone to different kind of fraud. The manufacturing has a different type of fraud, and so forth. But few things are pretty common, regardless of the industry we operate in. To be very frank, fraud is a industry neutral concept. It can happen to small Lalaji's shop. It can happen to the biggest of the brands. It can happen everywhere. It's just the face of fraud, the modus operandi of the fraud might change a bit. The concept of fraud never changes. These days, one type of fraud, which is very, very common in corporate, is related to employees getting into traps. And that trap is called social engineering. You may call it a cyber fraud or corporate fraud, whatever you may call it. But that's the area where we see a lot of vulnerability to the companies. We as an employee, the moment we get into a trap, we are vulnerable. And when we are vulnerable, our company becomes vulnerable. Company is an artificial entity. So who are we? We are the company. We represent the company, correct? Each time you are vulnerable, your company is vulnerable. It's as simple as that. So let's understand this concept, which is very interesting and important topic for us to understand to begin with. And this is we call social engineering. Any idea what do you think is social engineering? Social engineering is a fraud where the thing which is being exploited is the human tendency of trusting each other. This can happen in any platform. This can happen at social networking platforms. It can happen in a metro you travel, a flight you are taking. Each time you interact socially, you are exposed to this threat called social engineering. Now, if I may ask, how much is a probability that I send you a friend request on any social platform and then try to get confidential detail of your company via you? Well, most of you might believe, no, this is not possible. We are too smart for that. It's good to believe that. But unfortunately, that's not a truth. The success rate of these kind of attacks is 10%. That means 1 in 10 attack is successful. Imagine that's real big number, 10% success rate. How does it happen? So let me give a quick example and then probably you'll understand it better. I will send you a friend request, whether on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But here, when I'll send this friend request, I will do a complete homework before that. If you're a good fraudster, that homework will include profiling of yours, who you are, what do you do, what kind of interests do you have, what kind of thing which are weak point of yours. This homework will be really important for me to do before contacting you. If you see your normal social profile, you are always get friendly with people who are like you, who think like you, who talks like you. I have to think and talk like you, whatever is your nature and hobbies. After doing this homework, I'll come back to you, send you a friend request, and then become friends of yours. But then I'll be really patient with you. I'm not going to ask your company detail on day one. No, never. I will give you enough opportunity to test me. You are not going to trust me on day one. I know that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll give you enough opportunity that you test me and I'll pass that test. After 4, 5 attempts, you'll be embarrassed. Why am I trusting her? Not trusting her. She's a pretty good friend, right? And the day you believe it, it's time for me to attack. And that is social engineering. So in social engineering, basically what is exploited is the nature of trust. We as a human, we like to interact, we like to trust, and that is what is being exploited. That is called social engineering. Now, once we have understood what is social engineering, let's talk about some technique which we use for social engineering. First technique, which is very, very common, it's called farming. Let me put it very simple manner. You go to State Bank of India's website, go there, put your customer ID, you put your password. Website again asks for your ID and password. Most of us might believe that you may have punched it wrong. You may have forgotten your password. You may be wrong. Farming is a genuine looking website which has been recreated to do a fraud. So let's say this is SBI's genuine website. On that, I'll put a cover with my fake website, which is exactly look like SBI's website. Color scheme, logo, everything will look exactly same. There may be few changes in the URL here and there, but most of us may not be trained enough to look at it. Neither we bother to look at it. We simply searched on Google, we found that site and we opened it. Simple. That site may not be genuine site. So how it works? You put your cust ID and password on the wrong site. It punched it, saved it, and rerouted you without you knowing and giving alert to the backend of SBI website. Now this site, which is on the back side, is genuine. Now, since you are punching your cust ID and password on the genuine site, it will definitely ask for it. You go use your net banking and everything will be absolutely normal. You will get your messages. If you have withdrawn any money, everything will look exactly genuine. Because everything is genuine so far. But the front which has captured your cust ID and password has captured it for future misuse. This is called farming. So farming means recreation of a genuine looking website where most of the customer will be fooled on it. So each time you put your bank details, debit card, credit card detail, be doubly sure. Are you punching it at the genuine website or genuine looking website? Be very, very careful. For small few tips could be: one, check the URL completely. Check whether it is encrypted site or not. If it is banking site, it has to be encrypted. Sign of encryption could be small lock. Sign of encryption could be conversion of URL to green color. These are few signs that these are secured banking site. You can't see that, may not be genuine site. This is first type of social engineering. The crux of social engineering is to capture your sensitive and confidential information, which I don't have access otherwise, right? So that's called farming. Second is called honey trapping. It can target any gender. So let's say it has happened, unfortunately, in one of the case, a couple of years back in Indian Defense Services, where a very senior official from Indian Defense was honey trapped on Facebook. So there was a girl who was actually not a girl, who was actually from ISIS, but they got to know afterwards. She said that I'm a UK-based journalist, a beautiful picture, a beautiful profile. And she said, I'm writing an article on defense. I need your help. And imagine this guy who is highly trained for this, end of the day shared the inside base, air base and defense base pictures on Facebook with her. That's the reality. We might think that we are smart, but unfortunately, the fraudsters are smarter. It's time for us to outsmart them. And that's where the second type of social engineering comes into picture, called honey trapping. So the sign of this could be, each time you find someone, could be you are male or getting female or other way around, who's trying to be too friendly with you too soon, without meeting, without you knowing whether the person is genuine or not, be careful. This honey trapping can be front to get detail of your company. Maybe not you, but your company. Never know. The third type of attack is called phishing, which is another very, very successful social engineering technique. Each time we get a mail that you have won a lottery, you have got an income tax refund, RBI has issued a credit card to you, you are a chosen one. Since you are part of elite group, we are giving you a specific credit card, so and so forth. These could be all example of phishing attacks. So in phishing attack, we do get mails or messages. There can be different kind of phishing. We call them smishing. SMS plus phishing is called smishing. When you got a message that your bank account is compromised, or please call on this number immediately and block your account, this is smishing. When you get a call and somebody says, hey, I'm calling from XYZ bank and your account number is compromised and blah, blah, blah. So that we are talking about phishing. So this is wishing, voice plus phishing when you get a call, smishing or tishing when you get a message, and phishing when you get a mail. Social engineering. The variation of phishing is also called spear phishing. Now, this is very important for us to know. This is a very targeted attack on company. So let's say if I want to target, let's say, Hero Group, the entire phishing attack will be targeted to Hero company and the employee only. I might pose as a CFO or anybody senior in the company and send the mail to employees asking for confidential details such as their KYC detail, such as their bank account detail, and so on. This is really, really very common, much more common than what we think. I'll share a very quick example what has happened in one of my family members. So one of my family member was working in one of the very prestigious corporate in India and reporting directly to MD. So very senior position. Now this person was traveling to Australia for work. So all the data what fraudster used were actually correct. So imagine how much insider information somebody can have it. What hackers did, hackers hacked his official email ID. And from his official email ID, they sent a mail to his son in India that in Australia, I have lost my important briefcase, which had my passport and all the money. Now I don't have anything in Australia. I don't have passport. I don't have money, and I don't know what to do. Imagine you get such a mail from your father or somebody close in your family. What will happen to you? And when you know this is true, that somebody is actually traveling to that location. So fortunately, I was there. My simple question was, why didn't he approach to HR of the company? He's traveling for work, staying in a hotel which is provided by company. He could have contacted them as well. Why is he sending mail from his official email ID to you? Why not personal email ID? And that's how we got alert. At midnight, we called up the corporate, the concerned people, and then they said his official email ID is hacked. This is called spear phishing. So each time you as an employee get mail from somebody very senior in the company, and but asking for information which is not usual, be very alert. May possible that senior's official email ID is hacked and spear phishing attack is happening. The last one is whaling, is similar thing what we just gave as an example. So spear phishing might include whaling. It's also called CEO fraud, where top management's IDs are used, hacked IDs, and that is used to capture a lot of private and sensitive information of employees. So that's called social engineering. How does it impact as an individual, as an employee? If you're an individual, well, a lot of things can be at stake. Your bank, your passport number, your Aadhaar card, and of course, it can be misused in thousands ways. And if you are working in a company, here the objective of social engineering may be to capture your detail and your company's detail. There is a concept in fraud language, it's called mole, MOLE. Mole is an existing employee who steals the information from the company and pass it on to the outsiders. Well, you may have seen that in the movies, etc. Trust me, any one of us might be vulnerable to this. If somebody can trap us in social engineering, we might end up becoming a mole for the company, sometime knowingly, sometime unknowingly. So you better be very, very alert while dealing with people on social platforms, which also include your normal interaction in coffee shops, the metros, or any public transport. Let's say two ladies are talking in metro, a very normal conversation. How many people are there in your family? What time your husband goes to office? What time your mate comes? Sounds very generic conversation. Is it really a so genuine conversation? Well, I'm standing there, I'm listening to this conversation. In 5 minutes span, I understood what time this lady is alone in the house, what time husband comes back from the work, when is he traveling for work. Is it not very important information to do whatever I want? So each time you interact publicly and socially, be little careful. Each time you pick up your phone and message or check a message in public transport, be alert. Somebody is right sitting here and looking at your phone. I've seen thousands of times people doing video calls. Very recently, I was traveling somewhere at airport. At least I noticed 4 or 5 people who were doing video call with their family members. And me as a third person from far away could see the video call. The other person could be anyone at any place and any pose. These things are giving you a lot of vulnerabilities. A very quick example of our vulnerability in social mode or digital mode. I read it in the newspaper that a lawyer in Delhi, I guess, yeah, he got a video call on his WhatsApp at about 10:11 a.m. He picked up the phone to just check who's calling. The call was from unknown number. He picked up, he just looked at it, call got disconnected. That's it. He thought that it might be a wrong number. Within a minute, he got a message of his face at a very wrong place. And they said, This is your picture at this site. If you don't want to make it public, give us ransom. What was his fault? He just picked up the phone to just check whose number is it. That's it. On video call, your face can be clicked. That was actually happened to this guy. His face was clicked, and that's it. So that's called social engineering. And when we are in cyber phase, which we are, we have to be a little careful. The another fraud, which is unfortunately becoming very common in corporates and in employee, is called billing scheme. So billing scheme is, in a very simple term, that employees start their own parallel businesses. So imagine I'm working for ABC company, working in a procurement department, and I thought that why am I not doing this work for the company, but while in the job? So I will start a parallel company of mine. On paper, somebody else will be owner of this company. Could be anyone, my gardener, my servant. All I need is a KYC, right? If I ask my servant, give me your Aadhaar card, she wouldn't ask twice, right? That's it. I can make her a director in my company. That's what has happened in many corporates. So that's where employees create a shell entity, divert the business from the company to the shell entity, which is actually employees' own company, and gets involved in different kind of frauds. We call them billing scheme. Billing scheme might also include collusion among vendors and employees. Each time you see vendor and certain employee getting too cozy, be careful. Each time on social networking, you see a picture where you see vendor and employee sitting together, be careful. Each time you see sudden lifestyle change of employees, be careful. In fraud investigation, the most important technique which we use is called tips from colleague. You are the one who can give us the most important clue where to go. Each time you tell us A is suddenly wearing very expensive accessories, it's a clue for me to investigate. How is he supporting that income? Is he taking a bribe? Has he started a parallel business? Or what exactly is it? So employees may have vulnerability to get into different kind of fraud, like payroll fraud, disbursement frauds, where we give the fake reimbursement bills, like me traveling by auto and giving the bill of cab, or I am taking my client to some small roadside dhaba and saying, hey, I took him to the 5-star hotel for dinner. All these are reimbursement schemes. It could be also include some kind of check tampering scheme where we try and forge the signature of somebody senior in the system. However, billing tops the chart. So about 33.3% time, the companies get vulnerable to billing scheme. Especially people who are very, very, the kind of role they are into, they interact with vendors and outsider, they are more vulnerable to this frauds. So that's where we see a lot of potential of corporate fraud in this scheme as well. Correct. Apart from that, these are few examples. Whilst listening to me, you can go through these case studies which has happened, social engineering in the real corporate world. So the first example is from Sony Pictures, where they were actually hacked by North Korea's cyber army. Why did they do? Because Sony Pictures showed a movie which actually showed their leader in slightly wrong light. They captured employees via LinkedIn, Apple IDs, and so on. This is real case study of Sony Pictures. The another example of corporate fraud, social engineering, was the Syrian attack on Associated Press, where they hacked their Twitter account and tweeted from their Twitter account. So the word thought that AP is tweeting, which was not actually true. So this can happen to any one of us. This is just a tip of the iceberg. We as an employee are vulnerable to various kind of frauds. But since most of the time we are into cyberspace, whether it is company related or our personal time, our vulnerability goes really up. And guys, trust me, these frauds do not just occur on Instagram or Facebook. These can very much happen on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So my a humble suggestion to each one of you is that how much to talk on social platform is very, very important. That you should know what to talk and how much to talk. Also, what you talk on social platform, you actually represent the brand you belong to. So unfortunately, again, so let's say I'm working in ABC company. If I say something, people will start abusing my company. Stating that, see, your employee talks like that. But is that my company is nowhere in between. So each time we talk about anything, we represent a brand. And it is not just the brand reputation we are discussing, we are also talking about your vulnerability. If I post anything which is highly sentimental on religion or politics or any matter, somebody in the world is sitting somewhere is looking for me, who's very sensitive on religious part. And I'm vulnerable. I'm a target. Next time they will target me more. They may try and make me a mole because I'm already sensitive on certain matter and it is clashing with the other point of view. I hope you'll be able to understand it better. So that is about our social engineering and internal frauds. Well, apart from that, of course, there are different kind of fraud which can happen in different industry, which might include the vendor related frauds, customer related frauds. Here, a very quick point, if without taking too much of time, is that I would recommend each one of you as an employee, and if we are interacting with people from the corporate who can take this call, please try and add some kind of trainings inside, which includes understanding non-verbal communication. We generally believe that fraud only occurs on numbers. It only occurs on papers. But no, fraud occurs here first. And in order to understand the fraud and prevent the fraud, we have to really understand a person. Punishment cannot go long way, guys. Punishment is a deterrent for short term. It is driven by fear. The moment fear is gone, people will commit crime again. But if you can modify the behavior of a person, that really goes long way. So companies should, rather than focusing on punishment approach, they should rather encourage normative approach, where people will believe in those rules because they will actually believe it is right. So for example, when you see that cops are not there, you immediately remove your helmet. You immediately remove your seat belt. Why? Because it was driven by fear. Till the time cops were there, you know that there could be challan, you were wearing it. You know now nobody's there, it's midnight. Why to wear it? It's unnecessary. Have you really thought that this is for your own good? The day you will start believing this is for your own good, this is called normative approach. Now you just don't care if cops are there or not. Similarly, as an employee, one way that company will make a very harsh policy that we will remove you from the job, we'll do this, we'll terminate you. All right, driven by fear. The moment the fear is gone, you will do this again. What if you will start believing that this is our own company, or anything wrong we hear, if we do, it can impact my whole career? That is not right. I should not do that. Normative approach goes very long way. This is how this can be prevented. Now, that is largely we talk about frauds. Fraud is a concept which is very vast. It is very difficult to restrict this concept in few minutes. However, whatever we have discussed today was just tip of the iceberg, just to give a feel as to what is the vulnerability of ours as an individual, as an employee towards fraud. Well, this is the time for me to be open for question and answers. I'm really excited to take your questions now.
Yes, thank you, Kamaljeet, for a wonderful analysis of risk of corporate frauds. And we have seen, recently how this risk has truly multiplied. There was a McKinsey trend that talked about having a connected world. And when you had a connected world, the number of connected machines in 2018 were given as 32 billion. So 32 billion connected machines exist, within the world. That means 4 machines for each individual in the world are already connected. And while this brings a huge amount of efficiency in how to create, business platforms, it also creates the issues like cybercrime and, like all these kind of crimes, so it was wonderful, when you talked about farming, fishing, honey tapping, spear fishing, whaling, and fraudulent use of social media. So I have got a few questions. So let me just go to the questions. And the question I have is, how is social engineering different from cyber attack? This is from Mahalakshmi Murthy.
So social engineering is part of cyber attack only. So it is just a variant. Cyber attack could be put in as a broad heading, and these are subcategories. Social engineering is just part of one of the cyber attack.
Okay. So the next question is, what role can technology play in avoiding corporate frauds? Now, this is, truly aware, how to really put it. Technology is assisting in creating these fraud opportunities. So therefore, the solution should also lie somewhere in that. So what kind of tools can we use using technology to manage these frauds?
Correct. So as I always say, that computers can be used in multiple ways in fraud. They can be victim of fraud, they can be object to commit crime, and they can be subject to commit crime. So yes, as you rightly mentioned, that most of the frauds are actually done through technology. However, the solution also lies in technology plus human interaction. So we do use a lot of analytical tools and techniques these days. So a lot of companies have their own customized tools. For example, if I'm talking about procurement related fraud, so we create some kind of trend which use artificial intelligence, try to get some linkage between some employees in the vendor, or we try to get linkage as to if certain vendors are preferred in the system, and if they are preferred, then there has to be linkage with some of the employees. So there we see a lot of tool and techniques for data analysis. There are a lot of softwares available for fraud analysis, which can create the trend. And with artificial intelligence, they can also say that these nexus should not be there, which is actually there. So this is how normally the tools and technique of investigation consist of a lot of analytical approach. Along with that, I would always say that audits, especially internal audits, can be checklist driven, can be robotic in near future. But investigation is something where I don't see getting robotic very soon. So human intelligence is best. No matter how many tool and technique you use, do not underestimate your own intelligence. In frauds, most of the time, evidences lies are somewhere else. These are scattered. Connect the dots. You'll be able to get to the result.
I think, this is a very, very important observation that when you talk about connecting the dots, and that's where, probably the human mind comes into place, connecting various dots in, all kinds of unconnected data. But similarly is artificial intelligence, which you talked about. So next question is, primarily in your experience, have you come across, specific fraud, that you might give as an example, which either happened due to this artificial intelligence or could be prevented because of artificial intelligence?
There are thousands of examples. Unfortunately, the area which I work with, we come across such frauds day in, day out. So a very quick example which I share with somebody actually used very insider information and transferred. So it's a very simple fraud. What has happened that somebody compromised the net banking of one account. Okay. So let's say I have one account in A bank. A bank was very technologically strong, right? So they did not permit third-party transfers. They did not permit a specific amount above transactions, and fraudster was very aware of it. So it was combination of both the deterrent as well as the fraud. A fraudster, what he did from A bank account, which was very strong bank account, transferred from A bank account to same victim's B account. The B bank account was not technologically strong, had lot of loopholes in controls, lot of vulnerabilities. And then fraudster used the B's account to withdraw all the money. And unfortunately, when the victim approached to the A bank stating that the fraud has occurred, A bank said it was your internal transaction. We don't think it's a fraud. So in this example, technology was good at A bank. They protected, but unfortunately, it missed on the other end.
Right. So I think that's a very good. I have a lot of questions now, but probably time allowing, this seems to be the final question. This is from Vinay Agarwal. It says, how much internal audit and risk function aligned can help to prevent fraud, as it is responsibility of each and every function to in the organization to ensure to be vigilant and prevent fraud. And a similar question, is what is the role of corporate culture in preventing the frauds in the corporate world?
Sure. So the first question regarding internal audit, then long back, the auditors used to be very clear that fraud investigation is not our responsibility, but worldwide scenario has changed when you talk about Companies Act or you talk about otherwise. So internal auditors do have a responsibility to prevent fraud. And here, my submission would be that don't just follow a simple checklist-driven approach, rather go for enhanced risk-based approach. Each time you find a smallest of the red flag, dig down and try and know the reason. Sometimes it may be time consuming, which I understand practically, but then that's the only approach. So enhanced risk-based approach in internal audit is something which I definitely recommend. Apart from that, even internal audits, you can use a lot of analytical software to create the nexus between things and not just follow a simple checklist-driven approach. So that's about internal audit. Now, the third question was regarding the culture.
Culture, yeah.
So when we say control environment, this is nothing but governance or culture of the company. And culture is what? Ethics, integrity. So guys, ethics never flow from bottom to top. It always flows from top to bottom. And that is the role of good governance. We call it GRC, governance, risk and control. Good governance, good control, lesser risk. Bad governance, lesser control, higher risk. So ethic in the company and integrity in the company is topmost importance. If I'm a bad manager sitting on top, I will attract people like me only, who can give bribe, who can do the wrong things, and other way around. So it is super important to have a good, clean culture in the company.
So great, Kanwaljit. I think, this is, I can just go on and on, but I think we are just nearing the completion of time. May I request Mr. Ashwin to please propose a word of thanks.
Yep. Good evening, Joginderji and Ms. Kanwaljit Kaur, for a very insightful, very purposeful event on fraud risk in corporate world. The information shared has actually left our minds in fear that how vulnerable we are and how unknown risk posed a serious threat in the way of our working. It was a good opportunity to become aware about the potential risk, especially we all knew, but it was very insightful to know about the financial frauds, understanding the reasons of financial frauds with the weak internal, I would say, systems we have, and the social engineering frauds like farming, as already you briefed about honey trapping, fishing, spear fishing, and the honey trapping. Again, and especially the billing schemes. In fact, with these words, I would like to thank again Ms. Kanwaljit Kaur, Hero Mind Joginder ji, and his team for highlighting the key concepts on fraud risk. Just to brief before I end, as in CIA, we would like to definitely share that CIA has been a front runner in the evolution of corporate governance in India, right from the voluntary code of corporate governance released as early as 1998 to the report of CIA task in 2009. So we've been, as in CIA, handholding and always vouching for corporate governance. So thank you so very much, the team and the participants. And with these words, I would formally conclude the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.